2025 has been chaotic, sometimes in amazing ways, and in other ways that make you want to close your laptop and lie face down on the floor. But how does it look when viewed through the lens of public art? Because if you want to know the emotional weather of a society, you don't listen to a politician. Certainly not that one. You look at the walls. The streets react first and they tell a truth, whether you want to accept that truth or not. So that's what I want to explore in this video. The artists, the projects, the weird wormholes, everything that shaped the world of graffiti, street art, and public art in 2025. For anyone new here, my name is Doug. I'm a filmmaker, a communications strategist, a public speaker, and occasionally a curator. And I'm also apparently someone that has been doing these videos for 10 years.
2015 has been a big year for the art world.
Thankfully, I'm also now someone with a set of clippers. Look, I'm not claiming that this is the definitive street art account of 2025, but it is going to be one of the most comprehensive pieces of content that exists on this platform, and I can say that with confidence because I've looked and there's actually not a huge amount out there. We're going to be looking at this from an individual and an institutional level, and we have got a lot of ground to cover. So, cheers. I'm going to kick things off by taking a look at some artists that aren't necessarily new in their careers, but maybe ones I just haven't talked about on this channel before. Let's start with the French painter Nadège Dauvergne.
Alors, je suis Nadège Dauvergne.
I don't know why I started with a name that I can't pronounce. Her murals reinterpret traditional paintings in subtle and thoughtful ways, like she's quietly inserting art history into the public realm. This 2020 piece of hers was absolutely stunning, and her recent Marguerite nod, This Is Not a Sky in Epinal, is the perfect example of how a mural can blend into a landscape while still nudging you to look twice. Next up is the Belgian artist Spear, another kind of like not new, but how have I not talked about you before moment. Spear blends hyper-polished classical painting techniques with social commentary in ways that feel often rare in contemporary muralism. Take From Teeth to Taxes, painted on the side of an old church, where dead flowers and blooming ones stand in for corruption versus transparency, is such a smart way to talk about something as deeply unsexy as taxation, which for many understandable reasons isn't exactly a common theme in muralism. He also ran a print release where you could get a free piece of artwork by simply doing something charitable and letting them know. I think that kind of generosity and accessibility pumps some much needed joy out into the world. South African artist Elena Lorenz has also been a favourite this year. Her delicate line drawings feel like a counterweight to everything that's heavy and violent and noisy in the world right now. They're soft and emotionally vulnerable, and I think I personally have undervalued how important that is in public art. Like, the walls don't need to scream at you, they can just kind of exhale. Then there's the Sardinian painter Roberto Quireds, whose piece Essentials in Turnhout, Belgium was like this ambient dream. I think works like this brings such an interesting energy, like beautiful atmospheric work that transforms a space by challenging the feeling of being there. It's less about decoding what it means and more about just feeling its relationship to that environment and how it ultimately makes you feel. I know that this has all been muralist so far, but I do genuinely think that we're seeing fewer breakout artists within street art compared to say 5 or 10 years ago. I mean, there's no shortage of festivals with 50+ artists on their lineups, but the number of artists that are doing genuinely unconventional, risky, honest work feels slightly smaller, which is why this next project really hit the mark for me. One of the most authentic street art projects I've seen this year comes from a Russian artist who goes by the name of One the Walls. At least I think that's his name. His practice revolves around taking his child's drawings and painting them illegally on buildings, trains, and abandoned spots around Moscow. It's beautiful and wholesome, and I just genuinely love the aesthetic. I think it's one of the most honest bridges between graffiti and fatherhood that I've ever seen. Now, I'll be honest with you, I was apprehensive about whether or not to include a Russian artist while the war is ongoing, because I do stand firmly with Ukraine in solidarity, but I also think it's possible to acknowledge artists and projects in certain cases for exactly what they are, which is separate from the state that they exist within. I might be completely wrong on that, but just so it is absolutely clear, fuck Putin. Before we get into some of the bigger street art projects of 25, I want to start with Graffiti because there's been some really memorable standout moments that I think absolutely deserve their flowers for different reasons. And for one of the most chaotic moments of 25, we have to go to Australia.
Well, the man accused of Melbourne's Pam the Bird graffiti has worn a Spider-Man suit outside court.
If you've been anywhere near Melbourne in the last couple of years, you've probably encountered Pam the Bird. Since 2023, this cheeky little character has been popping up absolutely everywhere. High spots, weird spots, absolutely impossible spots. For some people, it's a technical marvel, and for others, it's an absolute citywide eyesore. A graffiti tale as old as time. But back in July, the story went full comic book,
turning his day at court into a live-action spectacle.
A 21-year-old named Jack Gibson Burrell burst out of Melbourne Magistrates Court dressed as Spider-Man, which is a bold choice for someone facing 208 charges. Most of which were graffiti, but others included things like assault, car theft, and ram raiding a restaurant. Not to stereotype here, but Australia does have a very unique way of giving us these larger-than-life criminal characters.
What is the charge? Eating a meal? A succulent Chinese meal?
And that's absolutely bled into the graffiti and street art world. Love him or hate him though, Pam the Bird became an instantly recognizable icon, where tags became symbols painted in spots that would make most of us fill our pants. And yes, people do call this vandalism, but if it were a Nike swoosh up there, would it still invoke the same response? Because when logos occupy our cities, it's branding, but when a plucky young 21-year-old does it, it's the end of civilization. Look, it's an old debate. Why do some marks get ignored or celebrated while others get people dragged into courtrooms? Is it value? Is it perception? Is it the marketing budget? Is it all of the above? So here's a thought experiment. If Pam the Bird was selling work for millions of dollars, would it still be regarded as a crime, or would we regard it as perceived cultural heritage? The case is ongoing and will no doubt feature in my 2026 wrap. If we're talking about graffiti paying homage to its roots, nothing came close in 2025 to the scale of repainting subway art. For anyone new to graffiti culture, Henry Chalfant and Martha Cooper's book Subway Art is widely regarded as the Bible.
My name is Henry Chalfant, and I'm a partner with Martha Cooper in the creation of Subway Art, which became one of the basic texts for the whole graffiti movement.
It's also regarded as the most stolen book in the world. It was the doorway through which multiple generations discovered graffiti. So what the Dutch artist Trippel did was borderline unhinged dedication. He spent 10 years recreating every single piece documented in subway art. He would repaint the original piece using his own name in the exact style of the original writer. The level of detail was so precise that it went down to the exact type of clothing that they would be wearing in 1984. Like, this is some Rain Man shit.
Memorize the whole book?
No.
You start from the beginning?
Yeah.
How far did you get?
G.
A full-bodied cultural research project built entirely through illegal activity. Mwah. The book Repainting Subway Art is now available to buy. There's an accompanying travelling exhibition curated by Jasper Van Es. I think it'll genuinely stand as one of the most impressive graffiti projects of the 21st century. Like, if I'm honest, this is the kind of project that makes other people want to quit. Like, it's just that good. And while we're here, I think it's worth clarifying something. When I talk about graffiti, it's often intermixed in two different ways. There's graffiti as a culture, which is the name writing, the codes, the lineage that's traced through the 80s, 70s, and 60s. Then there's graffiti as an act, which is marking a surface without permission. The act of graffiti manifests itself in different ways, from marking on a school desk, drawing on a toilet cubicle, or as it often does, in ways of political expression. I'm going to get right into that in the next section. But even though it is still very much culturally tied to its roots, it continues to evolve and to mutate in ways that are completely unpredictable. And that fundamentally is why it still matters as much as it ever has. So what does street art look like in 2025? Depends on where you're standing, because street art for me exists in two very separate worlds. The physical world and the digital world. The physical one, in which people are actually encountering the work, and the digital one where attention spans are in a permanent death spiral. 10 years ago, a clean photo of a mural would cut through Facebook, Tumblr, Flickr. But today you're lucky if your friends even see it buried under 400 different reels of funny dogs.
Here comes cannabis.
That wasn't a dog. But if you walk down whatever version of Brick Lane your city has, the walls are still absolutely loaded. Legal murals, illegal pace, weird interventions, sticker clusters, all of it. In physical space, street art still carries emotional weight. Most street artists now operate as muralists. Their careers orbit around festivals and commissioned walls, but a lot of that energy goes into creating polished, legal, easily repeatable work. This isn't a complaint, it's just an observation of how the texture of the culture has changed, which is why artists that do break out of that cycle stand out even more. Take the Portuguese artist Bordalo. Most people know him for his huge animal sculptures made of recycled plastic, but he's just as active on the illegal side, creating temporary site-specific interventions, critiquing anything from land ownership, tourism, environmental collapse. They pop up everywhere, monopoly boards in Lisbon, moving billboards outside the White House. They're sharp, they're fast, they're temporary, and they always seem to hit right on that nerve. And I think that street art is purist, not confined necessarily by mediums or codes, just by this idea of autonomy. Spanish artist Octavi Serra always sits somewhere in between social commentary and absurdity. This year he covered a Barcelona sign in fridge magnets, and it was this perfect little jab at the city's attitudes and relationship towards tourism, housing, gentrification, and the general feeling that parts of the city have just become a theme park. But given the temporary nature of a lot of these, their life and impact online far outweighs the impact that they have in the physical world. Czech artist Vladimir Turner released the Urban Disobedience Toolkit, which is a documentary collecting a wide range of actions and interventions that use public space as a canvas for critique, largely asking us the question, who owns the city?
Když byla výstava k sociálnímu bydlení, postavili jsme tam takovou rekonstrukci jako bezdomoveckého přístřešku. To je suchý strom, můžu si ho vzít?
This is street art not as an aesthetic but as a tactic, reminding us that the streets can be claimed, reclaimed and subverted. Shout out RJ Rushmore for pointing me onto MI Whiskey in Philly. Work feels like a perfect evolution of sign subversion. It works because the signs look official, the same materials, the same design language, but the messaging has just been completely flipped. Sometimes they're fun and sometimes they just punch you in the gut, but work like that always makes you stop because you can't quite tell if what you're looking at is meant to be there or not. Brighton collective Pattern Up have been doing some great things this year with billboard takeovers and product subversions. My favourite from their catalogue this year was the Southern Water Bottle. It was created after stretches of the English coastline were declared unsafe to swim in because privatised water companies kept pumping jobbies into the sea. Art beyond galleries being used as a device to open up conversations. And on the whole in 2025, it feels like the links between street art and activism have become more intertwined than ever. Groups like Led by Donkeys are basically operating as a street art collective. Large-scale visual interventions, billboards hacked into political statements, ground paintings, projection bombs. It all feels like a natural continuation of street art tactics just applied in a really direct political way. You see it in the global campaign calling for the release of the Palestinian political leader Marwan Barghouti, which used murals, huge ground pieces, and community-driven visuals to generate traction online. In an attention economy, scale and spectacle are powerful tools. Which brings me on to one of the most interesting crossover projects of 2025. This probably doesn't fit under the umbrella of street art, but I do believe it belongs in this conversation.
Protesters in their teens and 20s angry at the state of their countries, organizing on social media and taking to the streets.
Earlier this year, Indonesian students started flying this flag from the anime One Piece during protests.
So in August, there's a political scandals in Indonesia, and that's where this flag began to appear.
It wasn't a national flag, it wasn't a party flag, it was the Straw Hat Pirates' Jolly Roger, a symbol of underdogs fighting corrupt power, and it absolutely caught fire. Soon it was appearing in Nepal, the Philippines, other parts of Asia. So why this symbol? It became generational shorthand for resistance. It's recognizable, but it's hard for authorities to ban it, and it's owned by absolutely everybody. In an era where flags have become so weaponized, this subverted the entire idea. And it shows how pop culture isn't just entertainment anymore, it's political vocabulary. And we've seen this manifest in different ways, whether it's top down like Shepherd Fairies posters, or it's from the ground up like Pepe the Frog. It's like meme activism has become omnipresent. And if you want to zoom out even further, you can trace this same impulse in the bizarre 6-7 phenomena that took over 2025. Thousands of people repeating this completely nonsense phrase becomes this kind of like directionalist collective Dadaism.
6-7, 6-7, 6-7.
Yes, it's completely ridiculous, but it's also kind of revealing. It's an assertion of presence and identity and connection in a world that feels completely isolated and individualist. And maybe it's a signal to a larger cultural shift in which people are using symbols, serious or absurd, to express things that institutions can't. In an age in which algorithms have become so personalized and public space so inaccessible, we yearn for collective belonging. You could see this so clearly earlier in the year when 1,000 people in Edinburgh turned up to watch Dan Borman fold a fitted sheet. I think we've gone off on a tangent. So if street art is increasingly intertwined with political action, what does non-political street art look like? Sometimes it's social subversion with a kind of gentle hand, and sometimes it's just conceptually absurd work like Amparito's Jail for a Tree, a metal cage that traps fruit as it ripens, like a metaphor for value and access. Maybe it's a treatment of nature. I don't fucking know. Your guess is as good as mine on that one.
When you don't know if that's art, it's harder to consume it, because it's like, what the fuck is this?
But to really feel how street art can shift public space, we will have to look at it from a bigger scale, at projects that treat the city not as a gallery, but as a living organism. If we think about how street art can shift our perspective of public space, City of Play might be one of the best large-scale examples from 2025. Because one of the biggest strengths of street art in all its forms is its ability to change how you see a place. Not just visually, but emotionally. It nudges you into participating in your surroundings rather than just passively moving through them. City of Play takes that idea and it scales it up. Technically, it was an urban arts and culture program launched across the Ruhr area in Germany this summer, but that description doesn't really do this justice. In practice, it turned 3 separate cities into one interconnected playground. And I don't mean playground like slides and swings, I mean playground as a cultural mindset, a space where improvisation, movement, experimentation, public encounters, and creative disruption are actively encouraged. It physically moved from city to city, transforming each along the way. In Mulheim, viaducts, cycle highways, public squares were turned into an urban laboratory, a place where everyday spaces were being reimagined. Duisburg leaned into water, transforming the inner harbour into a space for floating installations, communal events, urban pools, and fluid, shifting interactions. And it was as much about atmosphere as it was about art. Because it's 2025 and it's all about the vibes, baby. And in Essen, things took a more educational and political turn, with a summer school exploring playful forms of resistance, participatory learning, and public space theory. There were large-scale posters, soft interventions, and a general sense that the city was being treated as a classroom, or maybe even a testing ground. I think what makes City of Play interesting is this idea of shifting public art as being something that's presented to the public, toward public art being something that is co-created with the public. Its cultural ties to graffiti go back even further, because that's exactly how Martha Cooper discovered graffiti. It wasn't through finished pieces, it was by documenting kids finding new ways to play in the streets of New York. This idea of play is literally how graffiti was born. And with that, I think it's time we went back to the more traditional side of street art culture, because while experimentation forms a huge part of it, murals still make up the vast majority of how street art is perceived in 2025. Murals still make up the biggest slice of modern street art culture. And depending on who you ask, you could make a valid argument that murals don't even qualify as street art. Because the mural world comes with cherry pickers and funding and city permissions and a whole ecosystem that sits miles away from the illegal, chaotic roots of street art. But whether or not it's street art, the technical quality of work being produced is insane right now. Every year the bar gets raised, and in the most interesting parts at the top, artists are leaning into experimentation. They're not just painting bigger walls, they're expanding their entire visual language. Broken Fingers is a perfect example of this. Over the last few years, they've stripped their aesthetic right back, away from the dense, high-energy surfaces into something that feels closer to a studio practice. It's still them, it's still weird, it's still punchy, but it's much more distilled, it's more intentional, and let's be honest, it's quite a bit more mature. Pat Perry continues pushing deeper into this painterly narrative-driven approach. His technical evolution feels like a direct extension of his studio work, each new chapter containing the parts of his past that he wants to hold on to and letting go of the ones that he doesn't. Mexican painter Paula Delfin has taken her style into more compositionally adventurous territory. She's moved away from the straight figurative work she was known for into pieces that feel layered, abstracted, and structurally much more ambitious. Maybe it's just me, but it feels like overall the pace for a lot of artists has slowed down. And I don't mean this in a bad way, it's in a way that has allowed artists to be much more thoughtful and intentional with the work that they are producing. Artists that are spending time in their studios exploring new materials and directions, and then letting those experiments inform their work outdoors. Helen Burr dropped a beautiful example of this. Soft, atmospheric, and cinematic. Alba Fabri did the exact same, creating pieces that feel like quiet moments frozen in time. This idea of just being able to let murals breathe. Neen is moving in an interesting direction too. Gorgeously composed works, that there's so many good ones that I could talk about. Honour's dog mural in Rochdale, England. Like a super simple concept, but just the technical execution on that is just so strong. I genuinely cannot get enough of Monos and Silverforms from Greece. Paramo was just so well documented, and just like I can't express how much I love their work just now. Fellow Doug, I haven't talked about Hoxel, but his work in the last couple of years has just been going from strength to strength. His experimental practice in the studio with weird sound waves, and then this new direction on the walls, it just comes out so well, and it just feels like it's becoming increasingly developed every single year. I love this mural by Guido Palmadessa in Greece. Just a beautiful, dreamy-like quality to it. I was also lucky enough to spend some time with the Italian painter Fabio Pitani in Kosovo this year. He created this stunning botanical piece. He then released Botanical Pulse in New York, a mural created in line with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and the Italian non-profit Urban 2030, and it actively absorbs pollution in the environment. It was one of 17 different murals, each absorbing the equivalent of 43 cars worth a day of emissions, and it will continue to do that every day for the next 10 years. Another highlight was the Nigerian artist Njeka Akunyili Crosby, who had her work realized as a mural. Like, it was just gorgeous. And it just got me thinking, like, why don't we see this more? Why are there no Hockney or Emin murals in the UK? Why do we not see more institutional artists cross over this way? Because it's almost always the other way around. Mural is breaking into galleries. Like, I genuinely don't know the answer to this. Is it a technical thing? Is it institutional elitism? Is it just tradition? Like, what is it that stops this being much more of a sort of symbiotic relationship, and it has to be this and this? I did a video on Katharina Gross, who seems to effortlessly move between these two worlds, but she seems to be the exception, not the rule. Look, maybe there's an argument that is good this way, but I think the idea of being able to see a Kerry James Marshall or a Nathaniel Mary Quinn mural in the middle of a city is like a really good thing. So while murals do continue to evolve, what do these bigger institutional projects look like? Anish Kapoor made waves when he teamed up with Greenpeace this year. Activists stormed a Shell oil rig off the coast of Norfolk, unfurled this massive canvas, and then poured blood red beetroot powder juice all over it, which was a brutal, beautiful statement on fossil fuels and the impact the oil industries have on our environment. I think when artists do climate-related work, they become targets for people to just say, well, what did that achieve? No, Anish Kapoor and Greenpeace did not end fossil fuel extractions, but they did something. And they did a lot more than I did this year. And they did this at a time when the climate conversation seems to have just fallen off the radar completely. Because we seem to be so ingrained into discourse at a micro level, it's impossible to see the forest for the trees. You could say the exact same thing about Banksy's piece outside the Royal Courts of Justice this year, which was one of his most pointed yet. His brutal takedown of rulings against free speech didn't technically achieve anything, but he brought people in. He opened up space for us to consider this, to look at it, to feel connected in some way. And sometimes that has to be enough. And watching the piece get painted off, revealing this sort of shadow, felt so metaphorically poignant.
A new statue in Times Square is turning heads. It's making people not only stop and stare, but also reflect.
Thomas J. Price's Grounded in the Stars caused outrage this year, despite being one of the most innocuous pieces of public art ever made. Just the sight of a black woman on a plinth was enough to send people into a frenzy. If you're mad about that, wait till you find out how your taxes are funding genocide in places of the world you will never visit. It's like the cultural discourse around everything has become so toxic, it's immobilized us into exhaustion and inaction. And maybe that's why we end up with pieces like Alex Decourt's giant inflatable Kermit the Frog in Art Basel Paris. I mean, even Kermit looks over it. Don't get me wrong, I like the piece for what it was, I just don't need to read an essay on its conceptual depth. Saying that, the French did bring Daft Punk's Thomas Bangalter out of hibernation, so you get a pass on that one. Vive la France. Let's be honest, the art world in 2025 has been brutal. Fluctuating markets, gallery closures, rising pressure, a fear of risk. It impacts everything. But I do get disappointed when I see big names phoning it in. Triple Trouble with Hearst Invader and Shepard Fairey felt soulless. Even the great David Shrigley phoned it in. Money for Old Rope was 4 displays of rope that had been collected off the streets of Brighton, fashioned into some kind of conceptual sculpture. Like, okay, fair enough. The art world wants it, the art world can have it, but from my perspective, it felt lazy, and if I'm being brutally honest, it felt privileged. And I say that as someone that really likes David Shrigley. It's like every year we just get another recycled version of Duchamp's toilet spit at us, where we're all supposed to mock the art world for how vacuous it is, but it feels like the only ones laughing are the ones that are free from the reality of these pressures. It's a paradox. This is the best time to be an artist, but the worst time to make a living as one. 2025 nearly broke me. This is the closest I've ever come to just packing this whole thing in. The fluctuation, 1 good month followed by 3 months of silence. It's so chaotic and so unpredictable, and it is really hard to find the energy to be that creative that you want to be when you're living in survival mode. If your response to that is to play it safe, I get it. Maybe Ireland has the answer. Universal basic income for artists. Trialed, turned out to be a success, now being made permanent. Maybe it's time for us all to dust off our grandparents' passports. So taking a look at everything, the murals, the activism, the play, the heartache, the joy, the burnout, what does 2025 look like through the world of public art? To me, it shows that there is a culture being pulled apart in 2 different directions at once. On one side, it feels like we're battening down the hatches and hoping that we can just ride out this storm long enough to see calm seas again. And then on the other side, the streets are as messy and chaotic and unpredictable as they've ever been. Public space has become the last place that people feel that they can actually shout about something without being strangled by an algorithm. And for that reason alone, public art has never been as necessary as it has right now. So if, like me, you found 2025 a balancing act between doing the work you care about and just trying to stay afloat, it's always important to remember that culture always breaks through those cracks. And I hope I've been able to show you plenty of examples of that. So if I've learned one thing from 2025, it's that no matter how chaotic it feels, people will always find a way to speak, and the streets will always listen. Thank you for sticking with me through another year. If you've made it this far, you are either very committed or very lost. Whichever one it is, I appreciate you. Hold space for each other, the ones that you love, the ones that are no longer here, but continue to make their voices heard. I'll see you in the next one.